Welcome back to Frontier Echoes, where the Wild West still breathes in every heartbeat of the land. Tonight's tale isn't just about horses, dust, or gold, it's about kindness, pride, and how one man's compassion turned into a legend. So before we saddle up, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story. And tell us, where are you watching from? Let's get started. The wind carried dust across the lonely road that led into Willow Creek. Every morning, wagons rolled through, riders tipped their hats to no one, and the sun burned the red horizon. Beside that road sat an old woman in a torn shawl, her hands folded around a wooden cane. People called her Old May. No one remembered when she first arrived, she just seemed to belong to the silence of the valley. She lived under a half-broken shelter built from barn wood and scrap metal. Her gray hair blew like wisps of smoke, and her eyes were still sharp, though time had carved deep lines in her face. Every rider saw her, but no one stopped anymore. At the saloon, folks would whisper that she'd gone mad after her husband vanished in the silver mines. Others said she'd once owned land that the rail company took from her. But truth in a small town often depends on who's doing the talking. One dusty noon, a line of wagons passed. A mother pulled her boy close as they went by. The boy asked, "Ma, why's that lady sitting there?" "She's just part of the road, son," his mother answered. "Keep your eyes front." The old woman smiled faintly as the wagon disappeared. She whispered, "Part of the road, am I?" and stared down the trail that cut through the hills. Farther up in the valley, Ethan Graves, the richest rancher in 3 counties, reined his stallion to a halt. His land stretched farther than most men could ride in a day, cattle, orchards, and streams that glimmered under the sun. But that morning, as he rode toward town for supplies, something tugged at him. Maybe it was the memory of his mother's last words, "Don't ever ride past need, son, no matter how small." He saw her then, the frail figure by the road, the same one he'd passed a dozen times before without slowing down. Today, though, the wind seemed to whisper stop. Ethan dismounted, tied his reins to a fence post, and walked toward her. "Morning, ma'am," he said softly. The old woman looked up, her eyes bright with suspicion. "You lost, mister?" "No, ma'am. Just figured I'd ask if you needed anything." She chuckled dryly. "Ain't much a soul can do for me now, except maybe bring back yesterday." Ethan offered a gentle smile. "Can't do that. But maybe I can help you with tomorrow." She studied him for a long moment. "You one of them Graves boys?" "Yes, ma'am." "Ethan Graves. My ranch runs north of the creek." "I knew your father," she murmured. "He used to buy eggs from my Henry before the mines took him." That name, Henry, hung heavy in the air. Ethan could almost feel the years of sorrow packed into it. "You've been sitting here long?" he asked. "Long enough to see the world forget me," she said with a faint grin. "They all ride past. Guess I became part of the scenery." Ethan looked at her shelter, a lean-to of rusted tin and broken boards. "Where do you sleep when it rains?" "Right there. Roof leaks less than most promises." He laughed quietly, but his chest tightened. "May, would you let me fix this up for you?" She shook her head. "No need to waste your time. This ground don't belong to me. Belongs to the bank now. Got foreclosed years back." Ethan's gaze drifted across the barren stretch of dirt. He remembered hearing about a foreclosure out here, small plot, unclaimed after taxes. What if it didn't have to belong to the bank? She raised an eyebrow. "What are you getting at, son?" Ethan straightened his hat. "I've got more land than I can fence. You've got memories tied to this patch. Maybe we can change that." That night, rain rolled across the valley. In his study, Ethan poured a cup of coffee and stared at the deed maps hanging on the wall. Something inside him wouldn't rest. By morning, he was at the county clerk's office. I need to buy parcel 19A, he told the clerk. That the old Ferguson lot? Belonged to that widow on the road, the clerk said. That's the one, Ethan replied. The transaction took less than an hour, but for Ethan, it felt like setting right a piece of forgotten history. He rode straight to the road where old May sat. Rain puddles shimmered around her boots. You again, she said with a hint of amusement. Got something for you. Ethan handed her an envelope, edges damp from his ride. What's this? Land deed, he said simply. Yours again. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the paper. You bought my land? Bought it just to give it back. May's eyes filled with tears that caught the morning light. No one's ever done something like this for me. Not in a long, long time. Ethan tipped his hat. Well, it's yours. Build, rest, whatever you need. The world still remembers good people, even if it takes a while. She clutched the paper against her chest. Why'd you do this, son? Ethan smiled softly. Because my father once told me, a man's wealth don't mean a thing if he can't share the sunrise. Weeks passed. Ethan rode by often, watching as May's new cabin rose plank by plank with help from his ranch hands. She brewed coffee for them every morning and told stories about the old days, how Willow Creek looked when the first train arrived, how she and her husband danced in the barn until dawn. Soon, townsfolk who had once ignored her began to stop by. They brought pies, nails, paint, small things, but meaningful. It was as if Ethan's single act of kindness had rippled through the whole valley. One afternoon, Ethan found her sitting on the porch of her finished cabin, the roof shining in the sun. Looks like you've got yourself a home again, he said. May smiled. Home ain't walls, son. It's being seen. And you saw me when nobody else did. Ethan nodded, humbled. Maybe that's what this land's for, reminding folks that no one should be invisible. That autumn, the harvest festival lit up the town square. Music floated through the air, lanterns hung from the oaks, and laughter echoed across the valley. When May arrived, wearing a new shawl Ethan's sister had made, the crowd parted like a river. Children ran to her, tugging at her sleeves for stories about the old days. Even the mayor tipped his hat. Ethan watched from the edge of the crowd, heart swelling with quiet pride. May caught his eye and walked toward him slowly. You gave me land, she said. But you gave this town something more, remembrance. Ethan grinned. Seems they just needed a reminder of what matters. May looked around at the lights and laughter. Kindness, son. It always was kindness. She reached into her pocket and handed him a small, worn locket. Inside was a faded picture of her and her husband on their wedding day. Henry would have liked you, she said. I'm honored, ma'am, Ethan replied, closing the locket carefully. Winter rolled in with frost and silence. One morning, Ethan saddled up to bring May firewood. He found her porch dusted with snow, her chair empty, a cup of tea still warm. On the table lay a note in delicate handwriting. Thank you for giving me back my home and my name. I've gone to see my Henry now, but I'm not cold anymore. Ethan stood there for a long time, hat in hand, as snowflakes fell around him. Then he looked out across the valley she loved so much, the land she had reclaimed. He built a small fence around her cabin and planted wildflowers in the spring. People began to call the place May's Rest. Travelers would stop there for shade, and sometimes children would leave flowers on the porch. Ethan never let the land fall to dust again. Years later, when he grew old and gray himself, folks often asked him why he'd done it, why he'd given away land worth more than gold. He'd smile and say, because one day I realized that land only matters if the people on it can stand tall. That old woman taught me what wealth really means. The wind still crosses Willow Creek, carrying stories through the grass. And if you listen close enough, you might hear a woman's laughter drifting from the porch of a small cabin, the sound of peace, of gratitude, of life remembered. And that, friends, is how one act of kindness can echo through generations. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this story touched your heart. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We'll meet again next time on Frontier Echoes, with another story from the heart of the West.